You are listening to Fictional Radio Broadcast, live reports from fictional events. This broadcast is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. What follows is a dramatized scenario.
If you are anywhere in southern Oregon tonight, especially anywhere near Highway 62, Fort Klamath, Chiloquin, or Crater Lake National Park, do not drive toward the lake. Stay where you are unless local emergency officials tell you to move. Fictional Radio Broadcast has received confirmation that sustained volcanic unrest is occurring beneath Crater Lake. That alone would be serious. But it is no longer the most difficult part of the story. Scientists have spent the last 2 hours comparing tonight's earthquakes with a reconstruction of the volcanic system that existed beneath Mount Mazama before its collapse, roughly 7,700 years ago. The match is not only geological. An archival document created decades ago contains a sequence of locations. Several of those locations now correspond to tonight's earthquakes. One of them corresponded to a fracture that did not exist when the document was printed. And according to the scientist reviewing that file, there are still several locations left. Good evening. My name is Daniel Hale. I came into the station early tonight because of what initially appeared to be a minor earthquake swarm beneath Crater Lake National Park. I want to establish the rules of this broadcast immediately. I will separate confirmed information from preliminary information. If officials change their assessment, I will tell you that the assessment changed. If something is unexplained, I will not fill the gap with speculation simply because the gap makes us uncomfortable. And if you hear something tonight that sounds impossible, remember that impossible and unexplained are not the same word. At this moment, there is no confirmed major explosive eruption. There is no confirmed catastrophic collapse. There is no broad evacuation order covering southern Oregon. There are localized restrictions around the park. Scientific personnel have begun withdrawing from some exposed positions. Emergency managers are preparing resources, and if you are considering driving toward Crater Lake to see what is happening, do not. The people leaving the area do not need to meet your headlights coming the other way. It is 8:34 Monday evening. Let us begin at the beginning. Weather across southern Oregon tonight is generally calm. Skies over much of the Cascade region are clear. Winds around the higher terrain are light. Temperatures around the Crater Lake rim are falling after sunset exactly the way they normally would. There is no thunderstorm over the park, no severe weather. No large regional earthquake. No reported landslide capable of explaining what the monitoring network began recording earlier this evening. The first event was small. At approximately 6:58, a seismic station southwest of Crater Lake recorded a low-frequency signal several kilometers beneath the volcanic system. It was not strong enough to alarm the public. Most people in the area did not feel it. An automated system initially classified it as a small local earthquake. A technician reviewed the waveform manually and changed the classification. The signal contained a sustained low-frequency component after the initial fracture. That matters because ordinary tectonic earthquakes usually produce a different type of seismic signature. Low-frequency volcanic signals can be associated with fluid movement, hydrothermal circulation, gas, changes in pressure, and sometimes magma. Sometimes. That word matters. One signal cannot tell you which process is responsible. At 7:07, another event appeared. At 7:16, another. At 7:22, two separate stations detected the same low-frequency component. At 7:31, analysts began tracking the events as a possible swarm. The earliest locations were estimated at depths of roughly 10 to 12 kilometers. The next group appeared shallower, 9 kilometers, 7, then close to 6. Those depths are preliminary. Small volcanic earthquakes are not always easy to locate with precision. But by 7:40, there was enough of a trend for technicians to ask a simple question. Was something moving upward? There was still no emergency. Earthquake migration can occur for many reasons. A fault can unzip through the crust. Fluids can change pressure. A series of fractures can move progressively through rock. Then, at 7:47, something else changed. One continuous GPS station west of the caldera showed several millimeters of horizontal movement. Toward the lake. Not away. Toward. A volcano is often described as inflating when magma rises. People imagine the ground swelling upward like a balloon. Real volcanic deformation is not that simple. Different blocks can tilt. Faults can move in different directions. The crust can respond unevenly. So one station showing several millimeters of inward motion was not treated as an emergency. It was treated as a possible instrument error. The receiver was checked. The processing was checked. The satellite solution was checked. At 7:56, a second station showed a smaller movement, also toward the Central Lake region. At 8:03, a third station changed. Different part of the caldera, same general direction. 3 stations, different locations, millimeters, not dramatic, but coherent enough that the scientific review widened. At 8:11, park personnel were informed that the monitoring network was investigating unusual seismicity. No evacuation, no closure beyond routine restrictions. No public warning. At 8:17, a maintenance worker near Rim Village felt a low vibration through the floor of a service building. He did not describe a jolt. He described something closer to a heavy engine running in the distance. The vibration lasted less than a minute. Nothing fell. No damage. When he went outside, there was no vehicle nearby. 6 minutes later, another employee in a different structure reported something similar. That still did not make the event extraordinary. Small earthquakes can feel strange. Buildings resonate. Mechanical systems vibrate. People hear low sounds from sources they cannot immediately identify. Then the lake instruments began changing. At 8:26, a temperature sensor reported water several tenths of a degree warmer than its expected short-term range. One sensor, one location. That means almost nothing by itself. Crater Lake is deep. Water circulates. Different layers have different temperatures. Hydrothermal activity exists beneath the lake. Warm, mineral-rich water emerges from the caldera floor in places. The first temperature change was marked for review. At 8:31, another sensor reported a smaller warming anomaly. Different instrument. Same general western portion of the lake. The lake as a whole is not heating. I want to say that clearly, because social posts are already claiming Crater Lake is boiling. It is not. There is no evidence of boiling. There are localized temperature anomalies. That is all. At 8:34, a ranger near Cleetwood Cove reported a faint sulfur-like smell, no visible gas plume, no illness, no dangerous concentration measured. Sulfur odors can have several explanations: biological material, vehicles, hydrothermal gas. A portable sensor is being used to check the area. That ranger has moved upslope as a precaution. At 8:38, the first official internal advisory went to park staff. Personnel not required near the rim were told to remain available by radio and avoid unnecessary movement toward the lake. That is the first operational change of the evening. We now have an early scientific statement. I am not going to introduce it with any special reading language. I will simply give you the information. A cluster of small seismic events has been detected beneath the Crater Lake region. Monitoring staff are reviewing seismic, deformation, thermal, and hydrothermal observations. Possible explanations include tectonic earthquakes, hydrothermal changes, instrumentation error, or volcanic unrest. There is currently no confirmed eruption and no immediate public safety action beyond existing park restrictions. That is the official position at 8:40. Volcanic unrest is one possibility. not the conclusion. At 8:43, the seismic count reached 22. Again, 22 events does not mean 22 emergencies. Most are extremely small. Many probably cannot be felt. The important information is the pattern. Depth appears to be decreasing. Low-frequency energy is becoming more common. Ground deformation is now visible at multiple stations, and 2 water sensors have changed. Scientists are interested in combinations, not headlines. At 8:48, a remotely operated camera facing the western basin showed a thin layer of mist above part of the lake. The image is dark. The feature could be condensation. Crater Lake can produce mist under the right conditions. The air is cold, the water is relatively warmer. The camera image alone is not evidence of volcanic gas. At 8:52, the mist disappears from one frame. At 8:53, it returns. No significant height, no dark ash, no glow, no eruption. At 8:56, another low-frequency seismic event. At 9:07, another. 9:18, another. 9:29, another. That spacing is now being studied. The intervals are not identical. 11 minutes, 11, 12, then slightly longer. But the sequence of the events is becoming more consistent. A deeper fracture, a low-frequency component, a shallower cluster, a short period of relative quiet, then another event slightly higher. That is what scientists mean when they say organized. Not because the volcano is following a clock, because the process may be repeating in stages. A listener in Fort Klamath contacted our newsroom shortly after 9. He reported that water in a glass on his kitchen table developed visible ripples 3 times over about half an hour. He did not feel an earthquake. His dog refused to step off the porch. Animal behavior is not scientific evidence. I will not turn it into that. The timing of the water movement is more useful. The times he wrote down correspond within several minutes to 3 of the low-frequency events. 1 household. 1 observation. Interesting. Not proof. At 9:28, a parked vehicle briefly showed the wrong position on its navigation display. The vehicle was on a service road. The map placed it several hundred meters inside Crater Lake. The error corrected itself after approximately 20 seconds. GPS errors happen. Terrain can affect reception. Satellite geometry can produce strange positions. No one is connecting one navigation error to the volcano. 9:31. Another ranger vehicle reports a compass heading rotating several times before correcting. Different vehicle, different system. Still not enough to establish a pattern. 9:33. One western deformation station has stopped moving inward. A northeastern station has started. The direction is again toward the lake. That means the deformation may be migrating around the caldera rather than simply increasing at one point. At 9:36, the scientific team made a comparison that has changed the direction of tonight's investigation. One analyst recognized the spatial progression from an old reconstruction of the Mount Mazama system. Let me explain carefully. There are no seismic recordings from the eruption that formed Crater Lake. There were no instruments 7,700 years ago. Scientists reconstruct ancient volcanic events from what remains: ash deposits, pumice, collapsed structures, magma chemistry, vent locations, faults, rock units, computer models. Those reconstructions are interpretations. They are not recordings. One reconstruction produced in the 20th century divided a theoretical pre-collapse progression into 14 structural stages. Tonight's first 4 stages appeared similar. At 4, coincidence remained the preferred explanation. There are only so many ways a complex volcanic system can fracture. If you compare enough modern activity with enough old models, similarities appear. At 9:41, a 5th stage matched. That stage involved hydrothermal disturbance within the caldera. the localized warming, the gas measurement, the mist, individually weak evidence, together enough to keep the comparison open. At 9:46, the sixth stage matched. Activity migrated toward the northeastern structural sector. That is exactly where the latest shallow cluster had appeared. 6 stages. Correct order. Still not proof, but enough that someone asked an obvious question. How old is the reconstruction file we are using? The database copy says the project began in the early 1980s. Parts were digitized later. That is normal. Old scientific work is constantly converted into newer formats, but some of the coordinate fields appear in a representation inconsistent with the original project. The first assumption was conversion. Someone updated the spatial data later. That would explain everything. The conversion history is missing. That is not impossible either. Databases lose metadata. Archives are messy. Then someone located a printed coordinate table, continuous feed paper, project labeling from 1983. The same numeric pairs are already there. That does not make the document impossible. Researchers can use coordinate systems before they become widespread. Numbers can be misinterpreted. Pages can be inserted later. Dates can be wrong. Scientific archives are created by human beings. Human beings make mistakes. At 9:52, the team plotted the first 6 coordinate pairs against tonight's activity. The first 4 fell within several hundred meters. Stage 5 was closer. Stage 6 was very close. Close enough that the archive team is now checking whether the page itself was added after 1983. At 9:56, scientists did something sensible. They refused to tell the field crews what Stage 7 predicted. 3 people wrote down the coordinate. The field teams were not informed. If something happened there, the report would be independent. If nothing happened, the sequence would fail. Everyone wanted it to fail. At 10:01, the temperature profiler recorded warmer water below the surface. Not at the top, a deeper layer. The instrument could have moved. Data processing is checking that. 10:04, another seismic cluster, smaller. 10:07, a lake buoy stopped transmitting. One buoy failing means equipment failure until proven otherwise. 10:09, a second buoy begins sending incomplete packets. That is more interesting. Still many technical explanations. 10:12, the western mist is visible on 2 cameras now. Still thin. Still no significant plume. 10:15, the portable gas reading south of the lake confirms mildly elevated hydrogen sulfide in one localized area. Concentration remains low. 10:18, we are waiting for Stage 7. This is one of those uncomfortable moments in live broadcasting where responsible coverage means doing almost nothing. We have a coordinate we are intentionally not giving you. The scientists have it, the emergency teams do not. The field crews are reporting what they see normally, and somewhere underneath Crater Lake, the low-frequency tremor is continuing. I have a photograph on the desk beside me. Some of you have heard me mention it before. My father took it when I was 16. Crater Lake in summer, blue water, Wizard Island, a perfectly clean sky. He wrote one sentence on the back. Still the quietest place I have ever heard. He was not a geologist. He did not know anything about caldera collapse or magma reservoirs. He just stood at the rim for a long time and listened. I keep looking at that photograph tonight because it is difficult to reconcile with the screens in front of me. The picture says stillness. The instruments say movement. 10:22. A lake pressure sensor has changed. We are waiting for confirmation. 10:23. Another sensor changes. 10:24. A broad section of the lake appears to have moved vertically by several centimeters, possibly more, then settled. No dangerous shoreline wave reported. 10:25. It moves again. Scientists are checking whether the pressure changes represent water displacement, instrument movement, or a wave produced by a small underwater rockfall. 1027. The location has been compared. It is within roughly 70 meters of the Stage 7 coordinate, written down before the event. The old reconstruction described localized displacement above the central platform. That is what the sensors appear to have recorded. Stage 7. The document did not predict a modern buoy. It identified a location. The modern sensor happens to sit near it. Could the page have been updated later? Yes. Could the coordinate have been inserted after the monitoring network was built? Yes. Could someone be manipulating the archive right now? The printed page makes that more difficult. Not impossible, difficult. The scientists are now looking for a second physical copy. If none exists, the archive problem remains suspicious but manageable. If a second independent copy exists, the problem changes. 1032. They found one. Microfilm. Different collection. Same 14 stages. Same coordinates. And that is where tonight stops being a normal volcanic unrest story. It is 1035. A second copy of the Mazama reconstruction has been located on microfilm. The archive team is comparing it line by line with the paper table. 14 stages, 14 positions. The first 7 correspond closely enough with tonight's activity to keep the sequence active. The microfilm matters because it makes a real-time digital edit less likely. It does not eliminate fraud. Someone could have altered archival material years ago. Someone could have misdated it. Someone could have created a later copy and placed it with older records. The issue is motive. Why would anyone fabricate a sequence decades ago that appears to match a volcanic emergency happening tonight? That is not proof of anything impossible. It is simply a harder question. 1039. The low-frequency tremor has become almost continuous. The separate pulses that define the first hours are beginning to overlap. Amplitude rises, falls, then rises again. That is consistent with pressurized fluid movement. Magma remains one possible source. Scientists are no longer avoiding the word. They are also not declaring a large magma ascent. 1042. A thermal camera shows a persistent warm area in the western basin. The temperature difference is several degrees in the warmest zone. Crater Lake is not boiling. I will say that again, because false information is spreading. The lake is not boiling. A localized area is warmer. 1045. A remote sonar system already positioned for lake research has been brought online. Scientists want to know whether the caldera floor has changed. The unit was not designed as an emergency volcano warning instrument. It is being used because it is there. The first return is expected within the hour. 1048. We have 3 private well reports south of the park. Cloudiness. Metallic taste. 1 yellowish tint. Groundwater can change after earthquakes. Sediment can move through wells. Pipes can release deposits. County officials are collecting samples. No broad contamination warning. 1051. A field crew reports a low vibration through the steering wheel of a parked vehicle. No discrete earthquake at that exact time. The vibration lasts about 12 seconds. 1054. Another navigation anomaly. A ranger vehicle appears on its own display to move west several hundred meters while physically stationary. Correction follows. These failures may be unrelated. The scientific team has asked technical staff to preserve logs rather than reset devices. That is the first sign that the electronics are being treated as data rather than nuisance. 1058. Stage 8 is approaching based on the spacing of the earlier sequence. Again, the field crews have not been told the expected location. At 11:01:06, shallow events appear east of the lake. 11:03, another. 11:04, a road crew reports a narrow crack crossing a service road. No dramatic opening. Several centimeters at the widest visible point. Dust rising from a portion of the line. No one injured. The crew backs away. The road is closed. The location falls within approximately 40 meters of the hidden Stage 8 coordinate. The old model identifies peripheral fracture initiation. That is the first surface feature tonight to appear where the archive indicated before the field report existed. The scientific team is now testing fraud aggressively, paper provenance, ink age if possible, microfilm history, project logs, names of researchers, old correspondence, anything that could establish when the coordinate table entered the archive. At 11:08, another important question is being asked. Could the original researchers simply have modeled modern hazards rather than the ancient eruption? If the coordinate table were a theoretical future scenario, then tonight's match would still be extraordinary, but not impossible in the same way. The surviving project notes do not label it that way. The table appears attached to a reconstruction of pre-collapse Mazama structure. That is not the same as saying the interpretation is correct. Old scientific work can be messy. Pages can migrate between folders. We will not make mythology from bad filing. 11:12. First sonar return. Most of the lake floor appears familiar. Known submerged volcanic structures are visible. Wizard Island's underwater base. The central platform. Other features scientists expect. Then there is a raised structure on the western floor, dome-shaped, roughly 150 meters across by the first estimate, 10 to 15 meters high. The comparison team does not immediately recognize it. That does not mean it is new. Old maps have different resolution. Sediment features can appear different under different sonar settings. Processing can exaggerate relief. The sonar team schedules another pass. 11:16. Thermal data above the same region increases slightly. 11:19. The low-frequency tremor strengthens. 11:21. A small gas pulse appears at a rim station, still below dangerous concentration. 11:24. The second sonar pass shows the dome again. The margins are clearer. There is still a question about height. 11:27. Scientists compare with previous high-resolution imagery. The feature is either new or significantly changed. Those are the two leading interpretations. 11:30. Stage 9 remains quiet. That is good. The old model may finally be failing. 11:32. A magnitude 2.4 earthquake appears west of the outer caldera. Wrong location, not stage 9. 11:34. Another event, also wrong. At 11:36, a sheriff's deputy on a county road north of the park reports dust rising from a straight line across the pavement. No crash, no construction. The deputy stops. The line widens slightly while he watches. Not enough to swallow anything. A surface fracture. Coordinates are checked. Within 31 meters of the hidden stage 9 position. The archive description is ring fracture propagation. Not around the existing crater lake caldera. Outside it, several kilometers outside it in some sectors. That does not mean a new giant caldera is forming. I want that sentence clear. A fracture arc can form for many reasons. Faults can connect. Ground can deform. Volcanic stress can reactivate older weaknesses. A ring-shaped pattern does not automatically become a catastrophic collapse, but the geometry is now wider than the present caldera. That changes emergency planning. 11:41. Scientists have released Stage 10 to emergency managers. The model describes deformation beyond the existing caldera. Stage 11 describes closure of the outer fracture system. Stage 12 describes rapid pressure release. Stage 13 describes major structural subsidence. Stage 14 is labeled collapse. The model does not specify that tonight will reach those stages. It did not know tonight existed. That is the rational position. An old document is not an instruction manual for nature. 11:45. Second sonar measurement against the western dome. The height has increased by approximately 3 meters. Diameter has also increased. 2 measurements are not enough to establish a reliable growth rate. But the feature has changed in less than an hour. Active extrusion is now a leading explanation. That means magma may be reaching the caldera floor beneath hundreds of meters of lake water. This would be eruptive activity underwater. It is not yet the explosive eruption people imagine from a volcano. No towering ash column, no lava fountain at the surface. The water above the vent applies enormous pressure. That pressure can suppress some explosive behavior at depth. But if magma rises into shallower water, the interaction can change rapidly. 11:50. Another sonar pass is scheduled. 11:52. Groundwater samples from 3 private wells show elevated mineral content compared with prior records. No dangerous contamination confirmed. County officials advise residents with visibly altered private well water not to drink it until testing is complete. 11:55. A topographic mapping system in one emergency vehicle displays a contour that should not exist. Approximately 3 meters of elevation change, forming an arc outside the present caldera. The field team drives to part of the contour. The road is level. There is no ridge, no escarpment, no visible ground step. They reload the map. The contour remains. They open another mapping package using the same source data. It appears there too. The obvious explanation is corrupted shared data. At 11:59, they check an offline laptop. Stored terrain maps. No network connection since before tonight. The same contour appears. That should not happen if the source data changed remotely. Could the laptop have been updated earlier? Yes. Could a hazard model overlay have been preloaded? Yes. Could software be displaying an accidental projection rather than measured terrain? Yes. Those are the explanations being checked. Midnight. The contour extends farther. A partial ring. No corresponding ground change along much of it. 12:02. A tilt station outside the existing caldera moves. 9 millimeters. 12:03. Another station. 11 millimeters. 12:04. The deformation appears exactly where the phantom contour line was already displayed. The ground is now beginning to change along a line the map showed several minutes earlier. That is the moment tonight when geology stops being enough. There is no known volcanic mechanism that changes an offline topographic map before the ground deforms. That does not mean the explanation is supernatural. It means someone has to explain the software, the archive, or the assumption that the system was truly offline. 12:07. Engineers physically disconnect the laptop. The contour remains. 12:09. The old paper reconstruction contains a cross-section. Scientists had assumed the cross-section represented the ancient post-collapse landscape. The dimensions are being checked. 12:12. They do not fit the known ancient caldera perfectly. They fit the growing outer fracture pattern better. Not perfectly. Better. 12:14. We now have a public advisory change. Residents in communities nearest Crater Lake are being told to prepare for possible evacuation. Prepare does not mean leave unless your local authority says leave. Gather medication, important documents, warm clothing, water, fuel if available. Know your route. Do not block roads because you are curious. 12:17. All non-essential personnel are being withdrawn from the park. Remaining scientific monitoring is remote. No public access. 12:20. The western lake mist has become a persistent steam column. Still modest. Infrared instruments show a faint thermal source beneath it. No open lava visible at the lake's surface. No major explosive plume. 12:23. Third sonar pass. The dome is now near 20 meters in height by preliminary estimate. More than 200 meters across. Scientists are calling it active extrusion. Magma is reaching the floor of Crater Lake tonight. That is now the best interpretation. 12:26. The frightening thing is not that Mazama only produces large eruptions. That would be geologically incorrect. Smaller post-caldera eruptions occurred after the climactic event. The frightening thing is that the structural sequence tonight is beginning to resemble the progression associated with the old collapse model. That is different. 1229. The outer fracture arc now extends around more than half the monitored boundary. Small shallow events southwest, west, northwest, north, northeast. The remaining gap is southeast. Stage 11 would require that gap to close. 1232. The station's first strange clock behavior. The analog clock above the production window is 40 seconds fast. The digital console time is correct. Battery replaced. The analog clock remains fast. Another battery clock in engineering is 27 seconds fast. I am not calling that part of the volcanic emergency. Cheap clocks drift. Batteries change voltage. Mechanical tolerances shift. But we are recording it. 1235. A sheriff's vehicle on Highway 97 reports GPS drift. The map shows the vehicle crossing forest while the deputy remains on the road. Position corrects. Another patrol car shows no problem. 1238. The map contour nearly closes. Ground deformation has appeared along 2 more sections. Other portions remain physically unchanged. The map continues to appear ahead of the instruments. 1241. A magnitude 3.1 earthquake beneath the eastern sector. Strongest discrete event of the evening. Light shaking reported in Fort Klamath. No damage. 1243. Magnitude 2.8. 1244. 3 smaller events. The southeastern gap narrows. 1247. Lake pressure sensors change abruptly. The thermal plume expands. Sonar communication drops. Returns 20 seconds later. The dome remains visible. 1250. The hydrophone records a continuous low sound. Not pulses anymore. Continuous resonance. The audio has been converted for analysis. Researchers describe something like heavy machinery transmitted through water and rock. 1253. Sulfur dioxide rises above background at more than one station. That is more directly associated with magmatic gas than some earlier measurements. Concentrations remain below broad public danger levels at monitored community locations. Field crews are already out of exposed low areas. 1256. A shallow earthquake appears in the remaining southeastern gap. Within 1 minute, 2 deformation stations on opposite sides of the caldera change together. The outer ring is closed. Stage 11. At this point, the scientific team is no longer using coincidence as the leading explanation for the sequence match. That does not mean they believe a document can predict the future. It means they believe the current volcanic system is following structural weaknesses represented in the old reconstruction. That could explain part of the pattern. The same faults, the same deep architecture, the same old rock. The same pathways reactivated by new magma. It does not explain why the old coordinates correspond so closely to modern surface fractures. It does not explain the phantom map. It does not explain the topographic cross-section that looks increasingly like the terrain change currently beginning. 1259. Stage 12 is pressure release. The intervals between stages are shortening. The last major steps were separated by roughly 30 minutes. Then 22. Then 13. If that continues, the next change could arrive quickly. 102. A lake camera goes completely white for 8 seconds, then returns. Steam obscures much of the western basin. Wizard Island is partly visible. 104. Thermal readings rise. 105. The underwater dome grows again. 107. Low-frequency tremor increases sharply. 108. The floor under this station vibrates. We are well away from the immediate caldera. The sensation lasts 6 seconds. The coffee beside me ripples. No discrete earthquake appears on the public feed at that exact moment. 109. Our backup transmitter briefly develops low-frequency interference. Engineering is checking the system. Primary signal remains stable. 111. The offline map changes again. The phantom contour is no longer a raised feature. It now shows a shallow depression inside the outer ring. That depression does not physically exist, at least not yet. 113. A deformation station northwest of the lake moves downward 14 millimeters. 115. Another station, 9 millimeters. 117. Gas reading spike. 118. Lake camera telemetry fails. 119. A remote pressure sensor records a sudden release. 120. A new underwater vent has opened in the western basin. Rapid gas release. Major thermal spike. The volcanic system has found a more open pathway. Stage 12. Pressure release. 122. A steam and ash column rises above the lake, small relative to a major explosive eruption, but visible to remote instruments. Radar detects material above the caldera. That is the first confirmed eruptive plume tonight. Crater Lake is now erupting. That does not mean the climactic Mazama event is repeating. Do not let anyone tell you that it has already become the same scale. It has not. But we have crossed from unrest into active eruption. 125. Airspace restrictions are expanding. Aircraft are diverting. 127. Residents closest to the park who were already under voluntary evacuation guidance are being instructed to leave. If your local alert says evacuate, leave. Do not use forest shortcuts. Do not drive toward the lake. Do not stop to photograph the plume. Do not rely exclusively on phone navigation. Physical signs and emergency personnel take priority. 130. Ash begins moving northeast at altitude. Fine ash may travel far beyond the immediate volcano depending on wind. If ash begins falling where you are, and you are not under an evacuation order, follow local shelter guidance. Close windows. Reduce outside air intake if appropriate. Protect breathing. But if authorities tell you to evacuate, do not remain in a dangerous zone simply because ash makes travel unpleasant. 133. A second eruptive pulse. The column rises higher. Lightning appears inside the ash plume. That is a known volcanic phenomenon. Particles collide. Charge separates. Lightning follows. It looks dramatic. It is not evidence of anything beyond the eruption itself. 136. The sonar unit fails. Its final usable return shows the dome significantly larger than the first measurement. Whether the equipment was damaged, buried, displaced, or simply lost communication is unknown. 139. Ground subsidence begins. West Station, down 30 millimeters. North Station, down 22. Southwest, down 27. 141. The values increase. West over 5 centimeters. North 4. The movement is not limited to one local vent. 144. Scientists classify this as stage 13. Major structural subsidence. The block inside the outer fracture ring is moving downward. Not evenly. Not everywhere at the same rate. But enough of it is moving together to be treated as one structural system. The affected region is approximately 15 to 16 kilometers along its longest dimension, larger than the present Crater Lake caldera. 147. Could it stop? Yes. That remains possible. Could it accelerate? Also yes. What would stage 14 be? Collapse. What would collapse mean? Potentially dramatic reshaping of the current caldera, rim failures, lake displacement, new vents, large landslides, rapid changes in eruption behavior, water reaching new magma pathways, potential increases in explosivity. The emergency management language is now colder. People in designated evacuation zones are being told not to wait for additional confirmation. That is the first point tonight where the guidance changes from preparation to immediate action. 1:52. The analog clock above the production window stops, exactly at 1:52. Second hand frozen. Engineering checks the second clock. It has stopped too. Digital time remains correct. 1:53. We remove the first clock from the wall. It starts moving. We put it back. It stops. The clock is now on the floor. It keeps normal time. That is not a known volcanic hazard. 1:55. A listener in Chiloquin independently reports a battery clock stopped at 1:52. Another report arrives from farther south. We did not ask people to check. We will not ask you now. Do not manufacture a pattern because you heard one. 1:58. Our wall clock starts again, then accelerates. The second hand moves too quickly. Removed from the wall, it slows. There are possible electromagnetic or mechanical explanations. None established. 2:01. Our digital map removes the words Crater Lake. The blue lake shape remains. Wizard Island remains labeled. Roads remain. National Park boundary remains. The name disappears. A second workstation does the same thing. A phone does not. We isolate the computers. 2:03. The name returns. 2:04. It disappears again. No explanation. 2:05. Magnitude 4.0. Strongest earthquake of the night so far. The studio shakes. The light above me swings. My father's photograph falls from the desk. This time the glass cracks. The crack crosses the blue water diagonally. Still the quietest place I have ever heard. That is what he wrote. The ground beneath this building is now humming. It is 2:08. This is now a regional emergency. Crater Lake is actively erupting. The eruption is producing repeated steam and ash pulses. Ground deformation is continuing across an area wider than the existing caldera. Ash is moving northeast. Airspace restrictions are active. Roads toward the park are closed. Fort Klamath is under mandatory evacuation. Other communities are under varying advisories depending on location and projected hazards. If your local instruction differs from anything I say generally, follow the local instruction. 2:11. A large landslide occurs along part of the inner caldera wall. The seismic network records the slide. A pressure sensor records the impact into the lake. No personnel are near that shoreline. The park has been cleared. 2:13. The lake responds with a strong wave. Remote sensors record several meters of local water displacement. We do not know what reached every section of shoreline. 2:15. Another eruptive pulse, steam, ash, fragmented rock. The thermal region broadens. Scientists now believe magma is continuing to enter the shallow system while the central block loses support. This is where comparison with the ancient collapse becomes more uncomfortable. The mechanism does not need to be identical. The modern structure is different. There is a deep lake now. The magma chemistry may be different. The amount of magma involved may be much smaller, but a caldera collapse does not require history to copy itself perfectly. It requires support to be lost across a sufficiently fractured block. 2:18. One deformation station records 28 centimeters of downward movement, another 39. A third becomes unstable. 2:20. A remote camera outside the exclusion zone captures lightning in the ash plume and a darkened horizon above the park. No clear view of the lake. 2:22. Our backup transmitter interference returns. Engineering says the signal contains a low-frequency oscillation close to the timing of the early harmonic tremor. There are plausible mechanisms involving stressed rock and electromagnetic effects during earthquakes. Nothing supernatural needs to be inserted. But the coincidence is being recorded. 2:25. The offline map deepens the phantom depression. The contour now resembles the post-stage cross-section printed in the old archive. A map created before tonight is beginning to look like terrain that is physically forming tonight. The scientific team has contacted one surviving researcher associated with the original project. He remembers the Mazama reconstruction. He remembers the 14-stage framework. He does not remember the coordinate appendix. That does not prove the appendix was not there. Memory after decades is unreliable. He is shown the cross-section. His first response is to ask why they are showing him a modern hazard map. He is told it comes from his old project file. He stops speaking for nearly a minute. Then he says he has never seen it before. Again, memory is not proof, but that is where the archive investigation stands. 229. Magnitude 4.4. The building moves. No structural damage here. 231. Ground subsidence accelerates. Multiple sectors move downward at once. 1 meter at one station, less at others. Some data may be distorted by shaking. Direction is consistent. Down. 234. Another caldera wall failure, larger than the first. Seismic instruments record a long rumbling event. 236. Pressure sensors in the lake spike. 238. The ash column expands significantly. 240. A magnitude 4.7 earthquake, strongest of the night. The microphone moves on its stand. The overhead light swings hard enough that we have turned off several fixtures. We are still on primary power. Backup power is available. 242. The emergency exclusion zone expands. This is a human decision, not an unexplained map update. Emergency managers intentionally approved it. I am emphasizing that because we cannot allow every screen change tonight to become part of the mystery. People are still making rational decisions. Dispatchers, road crews, shelter workers, scientists, pilots, engineers, families putting children into cars. The human system is still functioning. 245. One remote station reports more than 1.5 meters of vertical change relative to its earlier position. The value is under review. 247. A long, low-frequency structural signal begins. Not a normal earthquake, a sustained event. 20 seconds. 30. 40. Multiple stations record it. The pattern is consistent with major movement across part of the ring fault system. Stage 14 has begun. Collapse. That word sounds simple. It is not. A caldera does not necessarily drop as one clean disk. Blocks fail unevenly. Faults move. Walls fracture. Some sectors descend faster. Others resist. Rock slides into the basin. Magma and gas escape through new pathways. Water moves through a landscape changing underneath it. 251. The western portion of the lake is almost completely obscured by steam and ash. Infrared imagery shows several hot regions rather than one. That may indicate new vents. 253. Another strong pulse. Radar detects a higher ash column. 255. Ashfall expands northeast. People outside mandatory evacuation zones are being asked to stay indoors where practical and reduce unnecessary driving. Fine volcanic ash is abrasive. It affects lungs, engines, filters, electronics, visibility. 258. The central structural signal decreases briefly, then returns. 301. A surviving deformation station records more than 2 meters of change. No final interpretation. 303. A large structural pulse appears across almost every functioning seismic station. It lasts nearly a minute. That may be the main collapse pulse. 304. The eruption continues. 305. The separate stage progression appears to have reached the end of the 14-stage archive. There is an odd stillness in the monitoring updates now. Not relief. Something closer to people reaching the bottom of a page. For hours, the old reconstruction kept producing another line, another location, another category of change. Now the page is finished. The final numbered stage was collapse, and the collapse is happening. 307. The old model includes one instruction beneath stage 14. Observation continues after structural failure. No explanation. No stage 15. No coordinate. No hazard category. Just an instruction to keep watching. 309. A partial satellite image reaches emergency coordinators. Ash obscures much of Crater Lake. A break in the cloud reveals part of the western shoreline. The geometry appears different. That may reflect actual terrain change. It may reflect image distortion, angle, or cloud shadow. No final map will be possible until daylight, clearer imagery, and eventually field surveying. 311. A camera outside the park briefly shows what appears to be the lake under moonlight. The image angle has changed. Either the camera shifted or the ground beneath it did. Wizard Island is difficult to locate. That does not mean Wizard Island is gone. Visibility is poor. 313. The analog clock on the floor is keeping correct time. Our digital map again shows the words Crater Lake. The phantom basin remains. 315. A deep earthquake appears. Small, 10 to 12 kilometers below the newly subsided region. 316. Another, similar depth, low-frequency tail. 317. Another. The pattern resembles the beginning of tonight. Deep fracture, low-frequency component. A shallower response. For the first time since stage 14 began, the scientific team shifts attention away from the surface collapse and back down. Deep. 319. Comparison with the first hour shows a disturbing similarity. Not identical. Close. The same type of progression. The obvious geological explanation is adjustment. A large collapse changes stress throughout the crust. New faults open. Old faults close. Magma redistributes. Deep seismicity after a major volcanic event does not require a new catastrophe. That is the rational explanation. We stay with it. 321. The old comparison software is still running. Scientists had intended to shut it down after stage 14. Before they do, a new line appears. Stage 15. There was no stage 15 in the paper document. No stage 15 in the microfilm. No stage 15 in the original table. The software has generated one. There is no description, no coordinate, no magnitude, no hazard category. Only a status. In progress. We are not calling that a prophecy. Software can extend sequences automatically. Classification systems create new fields. A programmer may have built a default next stage function. Corruption can generate meaningless labels. The computer is being disconnected. 323. The new deep events continue. Still small. No rapid upward migration yet. 325. The comparison program is shut down. Scientists are returning to raw seismic data. That is the right decision. Stop asking the old model what happens next. Watch the volcano. 327. The printer in the monitoring room activates. A blank page comes out. Then another. The second page contains a line. Stage 15. Status in progress. That print job may have been queued before the computer shut down. That is the leading explanation. 329. No coordinate, no description. The sheet is placed face down. No one is using it. 331. The eruption column decreases slightly. That is not an all clear. Volcanic eruptions pulse. A weaker plume can be followed by a stronger one. But reduced plume height is better than increasing plume height. 333. Ground subsidence slows at several surviving stations. Again, not an all clear. A slower deformation rate is better than acceleration. 335. Ash continues. Evacuations continue. Road closures continue. Airspace restrictions continue. Hospitals across the broader region remain operational. There are injuries associated with shaking and evacuation. We do not have reliable mass casualty figures. Do not repeat numbers from social media. 338. The deep seismic sequence remains stable. Small events. No evidence yet of a second major collapse sequence. That sentence matters. Do not tell anyone another catastrophic eruption has begun. No scientist has said that. No official has said that. 340. The station vibration weakens. The backup transmitter interference becomes less frequent. 342. I have taken my father's photograph out of the broken frame. The paper itself is undamaged. The lake is still blue. Wizard Island is still where it always was. The sky is clear. Still the quietest place I have ever heard. I used to interpret that sentence as proof of peace. Tonight it feels like something else. Quiet is a measurement made by human ears. It does not mean nothing is happening. A landscape can remain quiet for thousands of years while heat moves miles below it. Rock cools. Faults hold. Water collects. Forests grow. People arrive. Roads are built. Photographs are taken. Children visit. Parents write sentences on the backs of pictures. Then one evening, an instrument records a vibration too small for anyone to feel. 7,700 years is almost impossible for a human being to imagine. Empires can rise and fall several times. Languages can disappear. Coastlines shift. Families become names in records. To geology, 7,700 years may be less dramatic, not an eternity, an interval. 346. The scientific team has confirmed that several of tonight's deep earthquakes are located directly beneath the new subsidence basin. That makes geological sense. Stress has changed. The shallow volcanic system has changed. Magma pressure has changed. 348. The stage 15 page remains face down. No one has touched it. 350. New ash advisory for communities northeast. Fine ash may continue through the early morning. Protect airways. Limit unnecessary outdoor exposure. Follow official local instructions. 352. The eruption pulse weakens again. Thermal activity remains strong. 354. Emergency coordinators say no one should attempt to return to evacuated areas until an all clear is issued. There is no all clear. 356. If you are listening from a shelter, stay there. If you are listening from a vehicle under evacuation orders, follow the route ahead. If you are listening from farther away, resist the temptation to drive toward southern Oregon at sunrise. There will be photographs. There will be satellite imagery. There will eventually be maps. There is no reason to become another vehicle on a road. Emergency crews need. 359. I have been on this microphone for most of the night. There is a certain kind of emergency where the explanation is almost as frightening as the event. A wildfire moves. You can map it. A storm rotates. You can track it. An earthquake happens. Then you assess what broke. Tonight has been different. We started with a seismic swarm. Then the earthquakes became organized. Then an old model resembled the sequence. Then the model contained coordinates. Then a hidden coordinate corresponded to a fracture that appeared afterward. Then a map showed ground deformation before field instruments measured it. Then magma reached the lake floor. Then the outer ring closed. Then the lake erupted. Then the ground began to descend. Then the old model ran out of stages. And the volcano did not run out of movement. Your mind wants a final explanation after that. Something that makes every detail belong to one story. We do not have that. Maybe the archive was contaminated. Maybe someone added the coordinate table decades later. Maybe the software has been misunderstanding old data all night. Maybe an extraordinary coincidence exists because both the ancient event and the modern event are following the same permanent architecture in the crust. Maybe the mapping failures will eventually be traced to a shared database nobody realized was shared. Those explanations are not emotionally satisfying. Science does not owe us emotional satisfaction. 403. The important thing is that uncertainty does not remove your ability to make a safe decision. You do not need to understand the archive to follow an evacuation order. You do not need to know what stage 15 means to protect yourself from ash. You do not need to see the lake with your own eyes to believe the road closure. You do not need the mountain to prove itself to you. 405. The most violent ground deformation appears to be slowing. The eruption continues. No all clear. 407. The comparison program remains shut down. The printer has not produced another page. 409. A technician turns over the stage 15 sheet. The original line is still there. Stage 15. In progress. There is now another line beneath it. No one saw the printer add anything. That does not mean the page changed by itself. Heat can reveal marks. Printer mechanisms can feed incomplete toner. A second pass can occur unnoticed. The paper is being photographed and preserved. The new line is not a coordinate, not a magnitude, not a location. 2 words. Sequence repeating. That is all. We are not interpreting it. 411. The seismic network records another deep event, then another. The depth progression is slightly shallower, the same broad pattern that opened the night. Deep, then less deep, then a low-frequency component. Again, this can be normal adjustment after collapse. It can be new magma movement. It can be the same system settling, no conclusion. 413. The difference is geography. The first sequence appeared to migrate toward the old crater lake system. This one is entirely beneath the new depression created tonight. 415. Another event, stronger than the last 3 but still small. No surface change detected. 417. The eruption plume grows slightly again. Not dramatically. Enough that aviation restrictions remain unchanged. 419. The station clocks remain normal. The map remains stable. No new navigation failures reported in the last 20 minutes. That is encouraging. 421. The printer does not move. 423. The deep tremor continues. 425. We have an updated partial satellite interpretation. The current Crater Lake Basin appears broader along part of the western and northwestern margin. Sections of the old rim have failed inward. The lake remains. That is the most accurate statement available. The lake remains. Its shape appears changed. The final extent cannot yet be established. 427. Wizard Island may still be present but partly obscured. We cannot confirm its final condition. 429. Emergency officials are warning that secondary landslides remain possible. Do not return to roads near steep slopes. Do not approach the lake even if eruption intensity decreases. Structural instability may persist after visible activity declines. 431. The deep seismic progression pauses. No event for 6 minutes, then 7, then 8. This is the first time the stage 15 pattern appears to stop. Maybe that is all it was. Post-collapse adjustment. A final series of deep fractures. 434. The scientific team is cautiously relieved. Not because the emergency is over, because one thing may finally have refused to become another stage. 436. Another deep earthquake appears, slightly shallower. Then another 20 seconds later, the relief disappears. 437. Low-frequency tremor returns. Not as strong as before. Clear enough to see on the instruments. 439. A surviving deformation station at the southern edge of the new basin moves inward, 2 millimeters. Another moves by 1. That is tiny. Could be noise. 441. The west station changes, 3 millimeters. 443. The pattern is not a second collapse. Not yet. But the system is not finished moving. 4:45. This broadcast has now gone far beyond the emergency segment we expected when we opened the microphone. I am staying here because the situation is still developing. But I also want to change the tone for a moment. There are thousands of people listening tonight who are not scientists. Some of you are sitting in houses with packed bags. Some are in school gyms being used as temporary shelters. Some are in cars with children asleep in the back seat. Some are farther away and listening because a place you visited once is changing while you listen. There is a tendency during large disasters to make the landscape the main character, the volcano, the lake, the ash, the fracture. But emergency management is really about people making small decisions correctly. Take the medicine, bring the coat, follow the road, do not turn around, do not stop for a photograph, check on the person next to you, keep the radio available. That is what matters tonight. 4:48. The deep event slow again. 4:50. Ground deformation remains low. 4:52. Ashfall continues. 4:54. The eruption pulse lowers. 4:56. No new stage appears. 4:58. I am going to give you the situation in the simplest possible form. Crater Lake experienced a confirmed volcanic eruption tonight. A new or rapidly growing volcanic dome was detected beneath the lake. The eruption transitioned into a period of significant structural subsidence. An outer fracture system, larger than the existing caldera, became active. Sections of the caldera wall failed. The lake was displaced. The final shoreline geometry is not yet known. Evacuation orders remain active. Ash advisories remain active. There is no all clear. A decades-old reconstruction of Mount Mazama's structural evolution matched multiple stages of the modern event with unexplained precision. The origin and integrity of that archive remain under investigation. An unexplained Stage 15 label appeared after the original 14-stage sequence ended. Scientists are not using that label operationally. That is the responsible position. 5:01. The sky east of the station is beginning to lighten slightly. Not sunrise yet, but morning is coming. For several hours we have been dealing almost entirely with instruments. Soon there will be daylight. And daylight is going to show people what the screens have been trying to describe. That may be harder. A number on a monitor can remain abstract. A changed horizon cannot. 5:03. The ash plume is becoming visible against the early light from distant cameras. Dark base. Paler upper plume. Steam mixing with ash. 5:05. A remote camera outside the exclusion zone briefly sees the upper portion of the caldera rim. There is a notch where there was not one before. That likely corresponds to one of the major landslides. 5:07. Another camera shows the lake surface. Only a portion. The water is gray under ash, not the deep blue from my father's photograph. That color may return when the ash clears. The shape may not. 5:09. One of the new deep earthquakes occurs. Then silence. 5:11. Still silence. 5:13. No new deep event. 5:15. The scientists are beginning to consider the possibility that the deep sequence has ended. Again, no all clear. Only one indicator becoming quieter. 5:17. The stage 15 page remains unchanged. Sequence repeating. No third line. 5:19. The printer is powered down physically. Paper removed. Network disconnected. 5:21. No new output. 5:23. That should be the end of the archive story for tonight. Whatever the file was, whatever the software did, whatever the coordinate table ultimately turns out to be, the monitoring teams are no longer allowing it to shape operational decisions. Raw instruments only. That is how the rest of this emergency should be handled. 5:25. A small aftershock. Ordinary high-frequency earthquake. No low-frequency tail. 527. Another. Also ordinary. 529. The deep volcanic pattern remains absent. 531. For the first time tonight, I am comfortable saying one development appears to be improving. The immediate deep migration has paused. That is not the same as the eruption ending. 533. Ash remains. Thermal activity remains. Structural instability remains. Evacuations remain. 535. I have placed the photograph back on the desk without the frame. It looks smaller outside the glass. Just a piece of paper. My father in one place, a camera in another. A moment that existed before any of tonight's roads were closed, before any of tonight's instruments changed. The lake in that photograph is not the lake outside right now. But maybe that was always true. A photograph makes a place look permanent because the paper does not move. The landscape never made that promise. 538. Emergency officials say initial daylight aerial assessment will wait until airspace conditions allow safe operation. No sightseeing flights, no private aircraft near the region. Do not attempt to fly drones toward the exclusion zone. Aircraft used by emergency teams need clear airspace. 540. No new major collapse signal. 542. A new plume pulse begins, smaller than the largest. 544. The new basin remains seismically active but comparatively quiet. 546. I want to give one final personal message before we begin transitioning into periodic updates rather than continuous coverage. If you have been with me since 8:30, you have heard the language change all night. No immediate concern, then unrest, then preparation, then evacuation, then eruption, then collapse, now cautious stabilization. Every one of those words mattered at the time it was used. That is why responsible information can sound frustratingly slow. People want certainty before certainty exists. Scientists cannot give that. Broadcasters should not pretend we can either. 549. There are still things from tonight I cannot explain. The archive, the coordinates, the map, the clocks, the stage 15 page. Maybe all of them will have technical explanations by this afternoon. Maybe some will become stories people repeat inaccurately for years. Maybe the strangest details will turn out to be boring failures caused by damaged infrastructure and stressed software. I would prefer that. A boring explanation is not a disappointing ending. Sometimes a boring explanation is a gift. 552. But whatever happens to the archive investigation, the geology is not a rumor. Crater Lake erupted. The caldera changed. The ground moved. People evacuated. Ash fell. And a landscape created by ancient volcanic violence reminded everyone that ancient does not mean impossible to reactivate. 5:55, the next official update is expected shortly after 6. We will remain on frequency. The emergency network remains active. If you are in an affected area, keep listening to local authorities. 5:57, no new deep tremor. 5:58, no new collapse pulse. 5:59, the eruption continues at reduced intensity. 6:01, morning. The first clear daylight image has arrived. I am looking at it now. There is still a lake. That is the first thing I want you to know. Crater Lake is still there. The western shoreline is different. Part of the rim appears to have collapsed inward. Steam rises from several areas. Ash coats the surrounding snow and forest. The water is dark gray-blue beneath the plume. Wizard Island is visible, partly, changed by ash. Still there. The larger depression predicted by the strange mapping systems appears to correspond roughly with the region of greatest deformation. Final dimensions remain unknown. 6:04. People will see this picture today. They will use words like destroyed, gone, reborn, woken. None of those words will be scientifically precise. The lake remains. The volcano is active. The landscape has changed. That is enough. 6:06. One more data point. A deep seismic event appears. Single event. No sequence. No low-frequency tail. Scientists are treating it as ordinary post-event adjustment. 6:08. No second event. 6:10. No third. 6:12. The Stage 15 page remains locked away with the archive material. No operational significance assigned. 6:14. That time matters. Roughly the hour tonight's investigation began. The current tremor level is a fraction of what it was during the collapse. 6:16. I am going to end continuous coverage here. Periodic emergency updates will continue. There has been no all clear. Evacuation orders remain. Ash advisories remain. The exclusion zone remains. If you are outside the emergency area, stay outside it. If you are inside a shelter, remain until officials release you. If you are waiting to return home, wait for permission. If you are listening from far away and thinking about driving toward the park this morning, do not. Let scientists work. Let road crews work. Let emergency teams move. The lake will still be there when access is safe again. It may not be the lake you remember. That is something people will have to accept. My father wrote that Crater Lake was the quietest place he had ever heard. I think I finally understand why that sentence stayed with me. Quiet does not mean empty. Quiet does not mean dead. Quiet does not mean finished. Sometimes quiet is just the space between events. My name is Daniel Hale. You have been listening to Fictional Radio Broadcast, live reports from fictional events. Keep your radio available. Follow local emergency instructions. Do not approach the Crater Lake exclusion zone. There has been no all clear. And if you hear someone say the mountain slept for 7,700 years and woke up tonight, correct them. Mount Mazama did not wake up. Mount Mazama is gone. What moved tonight was the system beneath the scar it left behind. And according to the instruments, for the first time since shortly before dawn, that system is finally becoming quiet. I would like to tell you that quiet means this is over. After tonight, I do not think I am qualified to make that promise. Stay safe. Stay on frequency. Daniel Hale, ending continuous coverage. The emergency signal remains open.